Just coming back to the question of the department, Secretary of State, do you think that the department has particular, given the scope of your ambition for decentralising power, what sort of changes do you think need to happen in the department in order to make that happen culturally?
Well, we're in a process of making that. I think our officials are in a different place in terms of decentralisation than when myself and my colleagues first arrived. And, there's no criticism meant there at all. But to push power down does mean that you yourself are going to lose influence. But Greg, you've been involved a lot in this.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps, Mr. Morris, can I give you an example of one of the changes and a new role that I think the department needs to create for itself. Those of us that were elected on the manifesto that we were, and our coalition partners, have a view that actually the best ideas, the best initiatives, don't all come from ministers in Whitehall or their senior civil servants, but actually they're out there with people who are running local government, who are in their communities. And if you think about that perspective and think about where the support is at the moment, then one of the things that the three of us found was that we are very well supported as ministers. If we have an idea, if we have a policy suggestion, we have officials who can help us think through it, look at what the blockages might be, regulatory, legal or whatever, and help us achieve that. But actually, if you take the view that we do, that there are many good ideas that perhaps don't get their head locally, then actually you need to think about have you got the right support there for people with the access to legislation, to regulation, to make their ideas happen. So one of the things that we are determined to do is to really sort of turn the department upside down and make sure that the kind of support that we have for our ideas is made available to people with ideas in our communities. So that is a change. It's not the abolition of the department, because actually sometimes rules and regulations and legislation do stand in the way of people getting things done. But we want to be at their disposal rather than just taking a view that all of the support is available to us and our colleagues.
Can I just come to one of the biggest decisions you took, Secretary of State, which was the abolition of the Audit Commission. Now, the Audit Commission had been responsible for the overseeing of local government for many years. So this is quite a significant change to the performance management culture of local government. Have you got a clear idea of what the future shape of the performance management regime, as it were, will be for local government? And
I was keen to, first of all, I think it was an inevitable decision, given the decision that we took earlier on to get rid of the comprehensive area assessment. Substantial part of the Audit Commission then effectively went. We had then to come to a decision with regard to the audit function, which I think has always been uniformly excellent. And we thought that the most sensible way would be to put it into the private sector. Strangely, the Audit Commission themselves were working on a similar proposition to that. And I think it's the most important thing is to retain the integrity of the audit function. And I think probably its future is much better in the private sector. Now,
your ministerial statement,
yeah.
you referred to the potential for certain people within the Audit Commission to become part of a cooperative arrangement. How do you see that working?
Well, as you know, the coalition government is very keen to extend the number of cooperatives and mutuals, and this seemed to me to be ideal to do so. What I was very keen to do, and what I made absolutely clear, is I didn't want a repeat of Kinetic. I wanted to ensure it wasn't the bosses of the Audit Commission, for want of a better word, that benefited for this, but the workers that actually benefited for this. And I think we should come out with a very strong audit function. I'm looking forward to working with the Commission and the profession to see this through. Now, I kind of accept in these kind of early days of the coalition people are going to kind of jump about everything we're doing, but given that the Audit Commission themselves were looking at this, and we are looking at this, I think there can be some broad consensus across the parties on this.
Some people argue that local authorities themselves, I mean, we've lived through a whole sort of 10, 15, 20 years where we've lived through this performance management culture, and now we need to move to a different type of culture to support the decentralisation agenda. To what extent do you think we should be moving more to a kind of a self-assessment regime where we don't need to have a heavy-handed audit of any guise?
I think there's always necessary to have an audit regime because of questions of probity. I think it's very true to say that by and large public bodies, local authorities are by and large pretty much corruption free. It's very unusual. It's kind of an aberration when it happens, but I think it is very important. Admittedly, the public have an ability now to look at expenditure in a way that they didn't have. Production of expenditure of £500 and all this kind of thing, but you still need, I think, a rigorous auditing function. The things that we do, I think, that are massively important in that is to ensure the rotation of auditors, so a cosy relationship isn't built up. After all, this is the normal way in which auditors are appointed. I don't think anybody is suggesting that we should nationalise the appointment of auditors for Boots, chemists, or for John Lewis and the like, providing the. I beg your pardon. No disrespect meant in any way. But the sensible thing is to ensure probity. And I wonder, Mr. Bitts, if I could correct something I said at the. Answering your question. I think I said Mr. Begill worked for KP, but it was actually Touche Laroche. That was just my memory had gone. It was definitely worked for Touche, I think.
Final question. Isn't one of the other constraints to implementing place-based budgeting around the fact that, that there's different performance measures for health, for police, and so on, which mean that it's difficult to align the funding with the targets or the non-targets? So how do we? It's to the point about cross-departmental issues. How do we overcome that?
We're trying to collapse targets. We're trying to get the local people to decide. And I think that days of down pressure on targets is kind of over. And I think there's a growing consensus that all you basically did was you got what I think the Army calls mission shift. You got rather good at ticking the boxes, but not that good about delivering the service. It's got to be about delivering. But my friend has been doing quite a lot of work here. And why don't you say something?
Well, can I just add one point to what's been said? We've talked about the financial benefits of it, and that's very important and it's very necessary. But one of the huge benefits of bringing together disparate public services locally is actually to make it easier for the people who depend on them to navigate the system. I mean, if there's one common experience I dare say we all have as members of Parliament, is people coming to see us in our surgeries, you're completely at their wits' end as to where to turn when they're in vulnerable circumstances. You've got to go one place for housing benefit, another place for JSA, somewhere else for housing waiting list. And these are people often in crisis, often people who don't have the same abilities that others do to understand the system. And then they're subject to this chaos that really they ought not to be. And I think one of the prime reasons for bringing together organisations who are there to serve the public together, sometimes literally in the same place, is that actually you can have a genuinely personal service. You can have someone turn up to a place and almost literally, perhaps literally, they can have an arm put around them, they can be taken to all of the different people that can sort out their problem. And I think if it doesn't save a penny, although I think it will, the achievement of actually making our public services, especially for the vulnerable, humanised is worth having in itself.
And if I could crave your indulgence, I mean, I feel the spirit moved in me as well. When we're kind of talking about merging local authority functions, planning and lawyers and all kinds of things, and even local education authorities. This actually makes, I think, the elected member more powerful, because they're, I think, able to start to tackle these questions of service provision within localities. And it shouldn't, frankly, be up to members of the public to try and have a civics lesson before they go in to get help, whether it's a 2-tier or 1-tier. All public services, I think, should be subject to that. There should be kind of a single kind of portal that you go through.
One further question on that. We talk about neighbourhoods, and that implies something of a relatively small scale. But is a city a neighbourhood?
No, it's a collection of neighbourhoods. I think we ought to be clear about that. Prime Minister's very clear in his article in The Observer. You can't go over to neighbourhood funding overnight. It takes a long time to put it together, but I do want to try and place communities in a position where they don't think it's just the council, but they have an ability to kind of change things.